Good morning, everyone. Hopefully, all of my things are together and working. Good morning. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. I am off to a rough start this morning. Most days I'm winging it. Today more than days. I got my flag up, so I'm one step ahead. It's not right, and I don't know when I'm gonna have time to get it right. But there it is. Good morning, Linda. I'll tell you what, I wing it most mornings. Today is especially difficult. I don't know why. I think I'm just exhausted. I mean, I'm completely work nights. Well, I work mornings, afternoons, but here lately I've been working a lot of really late night screenings. I can't even remember the last day I didn't work, quite honestly. And it's exhausting. And I'm happy to have the work. I'm not complaining. I'm very happy when you're self-employed like I am. I'm very happy to have the work. But it's like, what day? I don't even know what day today is. I think today's Tuesday. So, because when you work every day, all the days blend together. So Sunday night, I didn't get home till 3:30 in the morning. Last night, I didn't get home till about midnight. So it's like I'm sleeping a couple hours and getting up and trying to get things going. And I'm telling you, it's definitely starting to show. I woke up this morning and I kid you not, 10 minutes ago, I didn't have my hair fixed or any makeup on. I just kind of hurry up and throw everything together. But I feel like there's things we need to talk about. So here we are. And Matthew, I just have a few minutes as I'm starting work earlier. Good morning. Good morning to you, Matthew. Get some good stuff in while you're here with us. There is a lot to talk about, never fails. And I just I'll talk about this again at the end of the show. I just want to make sure everybody knows I am not going to be here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday because I'm going to be out of town. I generally can't talk about my work. I have a little less of an NDA with this particular group and talk about a little bit more. But we're going to be working on that movie, Can I Only Imagine Part 2. It's a faith-based film, and I'm going to be in I'm going to be in St. Charles tonight, and then we're going to be out in Springfield, Missouri doing pre-screenings of this film. So very, very busy week for me. I hate it because there's so much to talk about. And we're going to talk about the Epstein files because we're being told that these files are going to be released by this weekend or probably during the weekend, but it's not going to be quite what you think. So we're going to get into that. Matthew Crooks, of course, the Butler, Pennsylvania shooter attempted to assassinate Donald Trump. We're going to talk about it's a cover up. There's no question about it. It is a cover up. ICE in Charlotte, North Carolina. Palestinians are leaving Gaza for Africa. No one, said anything. They're just kind of quietly leaving. And allegedly, they're being kind of snuck out without any stamp or approval from Israel as well. Wendy's, I know we're going to talk about Wendy's. I'm going to talk about food in general because we shouldn't be eating any fast food anyway, but I'm sure everyone's noticed the prices have gotten higher. The food items are smaller or less. So we're going to jump into that winter preparation. As much as I hate to say it, it is here. We've got to get prepared. We've got a couple days before things probably get a little crazy and cold. And a TPUSA, Turning Point USA, still making headway around various colleges and universities in the country. I remember interviewing Charlie Kirk. Gosh, I don't know. It was a couple years ago. It was when I was on Real Talk, and Charlie Kirk came into the studio. Just a fantastic person, fantastic interview. And I really wasn't even all that familiar with Charlie Kirk before he came in. And I remember, what's interesting about that is his agent and a different show I was on a few years ago would reach out all the time. Hey, do you want to interview Charlie Kirk? And I kept thinking, I don't really know much about Charlie Kirk. I felt he appealed to a much younger audience than what most of followers and listeners have been. And I remember I thought about it one time, like, oh, they're calling again, to see about Charlie Kirk interviewing with us. And of course, I feel terrible at him. And of course, that was a couple years later when I finally did meet him at the Real Talk Studios and we interviewed him. And fantastic. I don't have to tell you guys about that. Fantastic. He was in town. He came in, interviewed with us, sat down for an interview, and then he was off to, I think it was Grace Church, to do some type of speaking engagement there. Very nice, personable, professional. That's one thing about Charlie Kirk. I know people have passed around some ridiculous images of him, But when you meet him in person, he's a very well put together person. He reminded me of the CEO of a company, a big company. Not that that's what I'm, saying that he is, even though he is, very important, was a very important political figure. But Turning Point USA is still very important. And at that time when he came in and interviewed with us, he is college campuses. I can't recall how many, maybe it was like 11,000 college campuses had chapters of Turning Point where there were young college students who would talk to students and try to recruit students into what they were doing, which is of course getting out the conservative vote, because Turning is a political action committee. So many people see it as so many different things, but ultimately it is a political. So we have these different colleges and universities who had their committee there at the school trying to recruit students, and that number has grown. The last I heard, it was like 30 something thousand, different people involved in these various colleges and universities, which is super amazing. Good morning, Rob. And oh, I see my camera is not where it normally is. And so I was watching this video last night of Turning Point USA. They were out at Purdue University, of course, very liberal university. And there was a professor that came in. And I was really shocked by this. And you would think that she would have seen a lot of the news coverage and said, hey, this probably isn't a good idea. But unfortunately, and it's part of the political divide, and I think part of the reason why we all have such a hard time getting along is that for whatever reason, people on the far left, I'm not talking about your just general Democrat, I'm talking about people on the far left, rights are above yours. You're not allowed to have a private meeting. You're not allowed to set up a Turning Point USA table, and talk to people about your beliefs, because you have to follow whatever they believe. And if you don't believe what they believe, you're not following their far left liberal principles, then they're going to destroy you. We've seen countless videos of people come in and knock over Turning Point tables, assault Turning Point members, tear up their different pamphlets and things that they have on their tables. It's horrible. And we've seen a number of arrests too, of those people. We've seen people who've had to step down. And, unfortunately, since a lot of these chapters are at colleges and universities, we do see teachers or professors in this case get involved. And I'm going to share this video with you. This is Purdue University. This is a professor. I do not know her name. It was not listed with the video, but she comes in and she wants to talk about racism and fascism because, of course, if you're conservative, if you're Christian, if you support Turning Point, then you must be a fascist and a racist. Even though, of course, Turning Point USA and its team members are highly diverse, people of all different colors of the rainbow. So I'm going to play this for you really quick, because I'll tell you, it's crazy. I don't even know what's wrong with these people. Well, I'm going to play it for you, but it might take me a second. Oh, there we go. I labeled all of my videos today, and all my labels are gone.
Oh, you want to know what fascism means? Because I'll tell you. You guys want to know?
Yeah.
Do you have a society? Okay. So you have a situation here where you want to go into classrooms and you want to tell the faculty that they're not allowed to speak the truth about the history of this country. You want them to be, what's the word for slaves now? Involuntary employees or involuntary workers. We can't even say slavery. That's ridiculous.
Wanting to impose on the teachers. We are wanting this to be within the students. And
the students want to decide what history is.
No, we know what history is, actually. Yeah. Did you know that all of our founding fathers were actually Christian, and this country was formed on Christian values?
Well, no, she would deny that. Of course, she's probably going to get up and lecture them about what is it, Project. It was on my mind to where it is. It's really frustrating to me, because this professor, if she wanted to speak to this Turning Point committee, what their leader, she said, and speak to your group, come in, instead of just marching in, basically accusing them all of being fascist and racing. They don't understand the history of this country. If there's anyone around right now who doesn't understand that slavery took place and doesn't absolutely abhor what slavery did in this country. Like them to say is slavery is actually still going on. It's still happening in different countries around the world, but no one wants to focus on that. Everybody wants to worry about what slavery once was in the United States and totally skip over the fact that slavery is still alive and well. You can go to countries like Libya and still see a stage set up where they're still selling slaves, from person to person. It's still happening. It's not over. It's just not happening here in the United States. These days in the United States, we're all slaves. We just don't call ourselves that, but that's technically what we are. Slaves for the purposes of taxation in our government. And good morning, Karen. And I'm just so sick of seeing these people. That's a lot of what I'm probably going to be talking about today is people who believe they are above the law. They think they're above the law. And that would be this professor, that she can just march in. Her values to her are more important than anyone else. Her beliefs are more important than any other beliefs. And she is right and they are wrong. So she feels that gives her permission, acceptance to come into this meeting for Turning Point and disrupt their meeting, talk about her points. It's just wrong. I hope she's reprimanded or fired for her behavior because I am so sick. I am. If there's one thing I could say about people on the far left, it is exactly that. It's probably the point of contention for me is that they're right or above all else. To believe what they believe and be okay with what they believe, or you're wrong. They're going to come over and trample your rights. And it goes back to, I was thinking about this last night. I'm like, what's the big point of contention between conservatives and liberals? And just think about that, because they believe in this big transgender movement that we should be forced to allow little girls, little boys into little girls' bathrooms, little girls in little boys' bathrooms, into the locker rooms. Drag shows for children, by the way, and it's kind of interesting because I've got a video of this for you to show, and this is a perfect example of what I mean. This is a child. Parents took a child, and many children were there. They took their child to this brew house out in Massachusetts where there was a drag videos of this drag show while they're talking to these children that it's okay to choose your gender. Yes, you might have been born a little girl, with the girl chromosomes, but you actually get to choose who you are. It's grooming. It's ridiculous. It's completely unacceptable. And then they have this little girl out dancing for dollars. Just wait till you see this. This is insane. I'm not playing any more of that. These are my points of contention. Leave the children alone. Whatever your beliefs are, leave children out of it. Leave them alone. Now now this here you have this little child. Hopefully this doesn't, form any long-standing values for her, but you have this little girl who's out there dancing with, I assume she's a little girl. Who knows? They might have been a little boy that the parents had dressed up like a little girl, because we sure see that a lot these days, don't we? You people have a baby, and when that's the baby from birth, that they're not a specific gender, that they get to choose their gender. And then baby, of course, as it gets older, they say, well, you can choose. Do you want to be a little boy? Do you want to be a little girl? Do you want to wear little boys' clothes, little girls' clothes? And kids, they don't know. They don't, and now some do. I should take that back. Some do. I have talked to some people who said, yes, I was born a female or born a male, but I never felt like a male or a female. I was it. That's a different story, and that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about kids who have no predilection to any particular gender. They are just babies. They don't even know. Then all of a sudden the little girl starts playing with cars and trucks, and next thing you know, she's wearing boys' clothes. They're cutting her hair like a boy because, gee, she's playing with boys' toys. She must be a boy. And now this got this at this drag show, and she's being thrown dollars. Now, what is the impression that this makes on this child? As she retains this information, and oh, that was fun, wasn't it? She got to go to this play, got all this attention. Everybody was clapping and on, and there was this very colorful dressed man, in a wig and what lingerie, I guess is the right word for that, lingerie that he was wearing, dancing and throwing dollars at her. Oh, this is just wrong. And quite honestly, it actually should be illegal. And what really bothers me, and again, going back to that point of contention, I would like us all to unite. I would common ground between conservatives and very far fringe left. On either side, they're never going to see eye to eye. But when it comes to the children, leave the children out of it. Leave the children out of it. If you're on the far left, if you're on the far right, whoever you are, and you have your own belief system, you have your own views of what you think life should be for other people, live your life however you want. If you're not harming anybody, live your life, but leave me alone. Let me do what I for myself and my own family. Do not interfere. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening. And it's not what's been happening for a long time. I remember when I first learned the liberalism, I actually remember that. People talking about liberal. I remember thinking, like, what in the world's a liberal? And then I started learning more and seeing more. And now, of course, it's more apparent than ever. And what a liberal to me is someone who sometimes, some of them are mentally ill, no question about it. But there's people on the far right that are mentally ill as well, who also, expect everybody to follow their beliefs and are not okay with anyone that opposes them. But some of these people on the far fringe left, they have lost their freaking minds. And they really do think that their beliefs are all that matters. Their way of life is all that matters. And if you don't conform to their ideals, then you are a terrible, bad person. And quite honestly, they think you shouldn't be alive. I might say, hey, it should be illegal to teach little girls to dress like a drag queen, but or illegal to interrupt a Turning Point meeting, but they actually want to murder us. That's a very big difference. And yeah, Matthew, what on earth? So much we could say about it, but is just terrible. Children should not be placed in that position. They absolutely should not be placed in that position. Greg, make all the trans teens use whichever staff bathroom they choose, and that will end quickly. You know what? You're right about that. That would end pretty quickly because most of the staff at these schools, they don't care because it doesn't affect them. Your children are just pawns. Good morning, Karen. And let's see here. And then Jay says, all of these mentally challenged individuals won't admit that they were born they were born biological right. Good morning, Sherry. Jay says, if you did that, your kid at home, DCFS would come and take your child. We don't know. I'm telling you, it's a long story that I'm not going to get into today. It's something that's been happening in my town, DCFS. Maybe if I have time at the end of the show, I'll get into that. But what I do want to talk about, though, speaking of, folks on the very far left and this big trans movement we're seeing in this country, it comes back to Thomas Matthew Crooks. Of course, he was the shooter that attempted to assassinate Butler, Pennsylvania. We all know that name, and we've talked about this situation many times. And this is kind of odd. And I'm going to explain, I guess, how I feel about this, because I'm trying my hardest. Donald Trump has been under so much fire lately in his entire administration that I've kind of got to this point where I'm either going to have to go against what their administration is doing, or I'm going to have to double down and accept that it's part of a larger plan. So I have chosen to double down and accept that it's part of a larger plan. There are things that's happening in I don't agree with. I made that very clear on the show. There are things that are happening that I don't agree with, but there are more things happening that I think are fantastic and that I do agree with. So I feel like the only course of action is to double down my support for the Trump administration and for President Trump. And in doing so, I sometimes have to accept that there are things I don't agree with. And one of those things I don't agree with is Kash Patel. And Sherry says, trust the plan. It's Sherry, it's hard to do. I'm sure it's hard for you sometimes too. It is trust the plan, but I have to remind myself. I've done this many times over the year shows where I'll, go down these rabbit holes and I'll have to remind myself, hey, reel it in. There are things that we're just not meant to understand. There are things that the Trump administration has to do, just like any other administration, that are for our national security, for the sake of the country. I didn't like that Al Shara, who used to be Al Jalani, was in the White House, that he met with Donald Trump. He's a terrorist. He's the leader of Al Qaeda, the Syrian branch of Al Qaeda. I don't like that he was there, but I understand for our country, the greater plan, not just me being upset that American lives were killed at the hands of this guy. I have to look at the bigger picture that now this guy runs Syria. He is the president of Syria. We have to have diplomatic relations with this guy, whether we want to or not. Diplomatic. He's not going to come out and say, oh, I really don't want this guy stepping in the White House today because I know that he killed our troops. He horrifically murdered a lot of people. We're just not going to deal and do business. As a country, we just don't have a choice. I don't like it, but we just don't have a choice. We just have to trust the plan. Sherry says, it is hard, but we are smart enough to see through the garbage and the manipulation. And that's a good point, Sherry, because most of what we see right now in the media is exactly that: garbage, manipulation, propaganda. But when it comes to some of these cases where I feel like there's a cover up, we talked about Charlie Kirk at the beginning of the show. I'm not going to go as far as saying there was a cover up in the Charlie Kirk assassination. I do think that there are some things that don't add up to me. And Sherry, I don't know, you were kind of there with about a lot of these points at different times. But in the end, I don't know what I think of Charlie Kirk assassination. There's a lot of plausible theories. But when it comes to Thomas Matthew shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania, to me, it is an absolute cover up. It was a cover up from day one. And I get frustrated because now Kash Patel is coming out and saying, nope, there's no cover up. Thomas Matthew Crooks was not even online. He has no online presence. However, for some of us who did the deep dive on this assassination attempt on Thomas Matthew Crooks, we know there was definitely more to the story. There was more to the story. And some new information is being released. And here's what's so funny and how contradicting it is. Now, some of us have always known that Thomas Crooks had met with a retired FBI agent. We've always known that. Why do we know that? Because a citizen journalist, remember when Elon Musk said that the citizen journalists are going to be, the journalists of the future, because we're there, we're on the ground, we have ways of researching and doing our own things, and we're far ahead sometimes of the media in doing those things. Well, there was a citizen journalist, if you recall, who went out to Crooks' home. He was able to somehow petition to get the records of cell phone numbers that pinged in the area of Crooks' home. And he traced those phone numbers, and he traced those to a retired FBI agent. And he said, well, this FBI come out to Crooks' home before the assassination attempt and after. And he definitely feels that they had a relationship or spoke in some way prior to. There's no record of that happening, though, no official record. And we don't know, did this retired FBI agent go out and take it upon himself to meet Matthew Crooks? Was there something more going on? We'll probably never know. And then, of course, we know that Crooks was using the same shooting range, the same gun range, is a lot of members of the Homeland Security. We know that. We know that. Apparently, Kash Patel does not, or is in denial that these things have happened. We know of the Butler shooting, there was another guy there. His name was Urick. I think, what was his first name? Was it Matthew Urick? There was another guy there, and I've got to be very careful talking about this at my house. This guy lived in Arizona. He was an explosives expert. He owned a company that sold explosives. He was there. His van was there because the initial reports about Thomas Crooks was that, I don't know if you guys recall this, when he was first arrested, they had his vehicle. Remember, they said, oh, there's incendiary devices, there's explosives in his white van. They towed away his white van. I have photos of them towing away this white van. And again, citizen journalists said, nope, that van is registered to this guy named, I think it's Matthew Urick for sure, out of Arizona. I think he was in Phoenix, Arizona. And that was not, and in the end, that was not Crooks' car. He had a car that was parked a little bit further away from this white van. And then nobody white van again. You won't see any official reports of this white van. Only what people at the scene reported, only the video that was initially captured and photos because they thought that was Crooks' van. And then we hear there were other arrests that day. I have photos of a guy being arrested like Urick. Looks just like him. There was an investigative, a citizen journalist home and talked to his sister. I played that video on the show. And, he wasn't home. He wasn't there. Why? Because he was probably in jail. And so, yes, there was a cover up. We could go down that rabbit hole and really do an entire show about it, quite honestly. There was definitely a cover up. And now we have Kash Patel who comes out and says, oh, nothing's going on. Nothing to see here, folks. Now, of course, those are the orders he's been given. What can you do? But what was interesting and some information that I wasn't really aware of that also came out of this investigation, and I truly, as many rabbit holes as I've gone down with this Thomas Matthew Crooks, I've not heard this, but now he's been tied to some of these trans power sites, and he was allegedly a known furry. No, now that won't surprise any of you. It didn't surprise me. But now Kash Patel's office and Kash Patel himself has come out and said it's not true. He had no online presence. He was not a member of any of these trans power groups or furry groups. But yet there are citizen journalists who can prove that he was. So it's like you have to sit down sometimes and reason with yourself and say, okay, I know this to be true. I've seen the proof of it. I am 100% within myself know that this is true. We have Kash Patel, a person that we trust, and admire for being in this role, someone who Trump trusted to be in this position, who's telling us everything you think you know is not true. And then you have to tell yourself, okay, I know that's not true, but yet we have to trust the plan. It's sometimes, some days it's really difficult to trust. Very difficult. Man, good morning, Jamie. You finally have me. Now you can watch and listen 24/7. Technical issues aren't always good enough for you to watch. Sherry says, Tucker, but happy to have you, Jamie. Sherry says, Tucker proved his digital footprint. That's traction. Exactly, Sherry. Exactly. Mary says, why would Kash lie? Mary, I would like to know that too. And remember when, and we're going to talk about the Epstein files in just a second, but remember when they came out and they say, oh, Epstein literally did unalive himself in prison. Yep, that was him. He's gone. There was no conspiracy. Nothing happened. And we're all like, yeah, right. We all know. Now, that one we can't prove as much as we can with what happened with Crooks. Everything about Crooks, which is why I'm using him as an example, we know to be true. I can show you factual information to show you that these things are true. Now, why would Kash Patel tell us it's not true? So let's think about this. Okay, the FBI, obviously, who's Kash Patel? The top man of the totem pole of the FBI now. He has to protect, I'm sure, FBI assets. Now, this FBI agent was a retired FBI agent. Whose side was he on? You have to remember here in the United States, it's not too different from a lot of other countries. We have these CIA operations that go on. It's kind of funny when people talk bad about Putin. They're like, oh, he was one part of the KGB and they did all these terrible things to people. Hello. What do you think the CIA does here in the United States? They do terrible things also. Now, most of the time it's for the good of our national security. Sometimes it's for political revenge. There's a lot of different things that take place. And I really do think and see the Democrat Party as a regime. I really do. And I've talked about it for many years now, not a new theory. The Democrat Party is a regime, just like we have the Ba'ath regime that was in Syria that was recently ousted by Al Qaeda. We have different regimes in different countries. Here in the United States, we have the Democrat regime and we have uh, I guess you would call them the opposers, which would be the Republican regime. I guess you could call them a regime. Now, basically, when we all went out and we voted for Donald Trump, that was a coup. We staged a coup against the regime, the Democrat regime, by going out and voting. So we staged that regime, meaning that the regime of the Democrat Party has been very long-standing in this country. And if you look at it and talk about it like you were in a different, dealing with a different country and understand it in those terms, it's the same thing here. We just have more polite ways of talking about it in this country. So I do believe that the Democrat regime was desperate. They knew they were about to lose power. They knew they were about to be ousted by the people who have come together. It was an uprising. If you were in a different country, they'd be called an uprising. We had an uprising in this country, and the uprising was that we as Christians finally had enough. And we had an uprising, a coup by going out and voting the Democrat regime. They didn't want that to happen. They don't want to lose control of power. And I do believe, this is just me saying this, I have no proof of this aspect. I do believe there was a CIA operation. Someday we'll know. We might be really old at that time, but someday they'll come out and it'll have some name and they'll say, oh, that was that operation, CIA operation back in the day that whatever Democrat gave the green light to, probably the auto pen is what I'm guessing, gave the green light, an effort to assassinate Donald Trump so that the Republican Party didn't take control of this country or didn't keep control of this country. And Darlene says, we will never know the truth. Darlene, you're right. We will never know the truth. We think we know what we know. And I think most of the time we're right, but we'll never really know. It's just a big cover up. And Kash Patel, I admire the guy. I like him. I'm glad he's in that he's in, but he has to play by some rules. And those rules are keep Americans in the dark. Because don't keep Americans in the dark. What do you think is going to happen? Now, I can promise you, at least I will promise you, you can take that with a grain of salt, that Kash Patel knows exactly what happened. He knows exactly what happened. But he has to put on that face to the American people and say, yes, I realize there's all this information out there, but none of it's true. None of it's true. Epstein did unalive himself because, that's what he's going to tell us. I don't believe that. He'll say Thomas Crooks did not conspire with the CIA or any other government operative besides being in a Blackstone commercial. I mean, gee, how obvious can it be? And he has to tell us that, because if we knew the truth, just think if Kash Patel, Donald Trump or whoever stood up on a stage and they said, oh, yes, it was a cover up, the CIA, or maybe it was Iran. There's so many different theories out there that they got a hold of Crooks. Maybe it was MK Ultra. Who knows? I'm not sure if I believe in MK Ultra, but I know people talk about that quite a bit. It could have been any number of circumstances. But if he came out and told us that, guess what would happen? There would be a revolution. There would be a civil war in this country. And what does the Trump administration or any administration want to keep from happening? That would be a civil war. They don't want us to be in a civil war. They don't want another uprising, because I can guarantee you, if we people knew everything they've done, we can guess, we have an idea. But if we actually knew of all the CIA operations that have taken place that harmed Americans, that hurt us, that were cover-ups, we wouldn't be standing here talking about it right now. We would be out, somewhere taking action. So that's why they cover it up. But it's really frustrating to me. And Mary, I think that's why Kash lied, because he has peace. And the same thing with the Epstein files. They have to keep the peace. And we're hearing that the Epstein files are going to be released this weekend. Donald Trump says, hey, I want the files to be released. I have nothing to hide. And I don't think he has anything to hide. I have been so busy. I haven't had time to go back and find the video. But Donald Trump, I've played it on the show before. And he talks about the hoax. See, liberals, they want to turn this against Donald Trump. They say, oh, he just thinks it's all a hoax. He doesn't believe that Epstein ever had any females, all just a big hoax. What about the victims? It's not, that is not how Donald Trump meant it. It's a hoax because he said that the Democrats are trying to manipulate and propagandize the whole Epstein deal to make it look like he's the number one guy, that he's the guilty one. That's the hoax. The hoax is not the entire case. The hoax is that he knows Democrats have hidden files. We know that. We know the FBI hid those files in New York. Comey's daughter, of course, being in charge of those files, of course they hid them. They know they've manipulated, the documents to point at Donald Trump. And I know that Trump's name is in those files. I've talked about that on the show. I played and talked about one of the witnesses who Donald Trump did not touch. She never accused him of touching her in any way, shape, or form. But we know that Donald Trump knew Epstein in this woman's testimony. She went to an office building. I don't think it was Trump Tower, but it could have been. But she went to an office building to meet and be interviewed for a secretarial job with Epstein. So she came in and she's sitting in the waiting room. She said Donald Trump came out of nowhere, was towering over her. I mean, what is he, 6'4"? He's going to tower over anyone who's sitting in a chair. And she felt so intimidated by Donald Trump. He didn't say anything wrong to her. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't hit on there. It was just an office building. We know they knew each other. New York City is not very big. It seems like it's big, but you know how that is. No matter how big a town is, your certain groups of people, especially elite people, hang out in the same places. It happens in St. Louis. It happens in every city. So therefore, yes, they're going to run in the same circles. We know the explanation for what happened at Mar-a-Lago. It explains a lot of those emails that Epstein and Maxwell were coming to Mar-a-Lago. This was really kind of at the beginning when Epstein first started getting these girls and trafficking these girls. He would come in and he would poach the servers and massage therapists at Mar-a-Lago. And finally, Donald Trump said, enough. And he warned Epstein and Maxwell, do not come into Mar-a-Lago and hire away my people. He hired the best servers, the best massage therapists for Mar-a-Lago, which is a resort and spa, by the way, particularly so. And he warned them, don't do it. I hand selected these people, do not poach them from me. Well, when it continued to happen, guess what? He banned Maxwell and Epstein from coming to Mar-a-Lago. I know I'm just telling you something you already know. And so a lot of those emails are just taken out of context. Now, here's the problem, though, is that we're going to be seeing these files being released. And everybody's very excited about the Epstein files being released. But I'm just going to tell you ahead of time, because I don't want you to be as disappointed when it happens. There's nothing you're going to find in these files that you don't already know. There's going to be probably no new names. There's going to be no new information, because we are already being prepped and told that they're going to be heavily redacted for, there's some national security restrictions on these files. So when you see these files, and you're going to see them, it's going to be a public release that, again, is supposed to happen this weekend. When you see these files, it's going to be a whole lot of nothing. It's going to be a whole lot of redaction. Remember how we used to joke? I even sent around the meme myself that showed a file and it was all like redacted. You couldn't see a darn thing other than like we, they, us. It's going to be the same thing. So don't get your hopes up that there's going to be some release of Epstein files and we're going to find out all this information. We're not going to. The internet is already out there. Everything there is already out there, but there is still a little bit of fallout. We're going to get to that. But first, what I want to make very, very clear, because I made a statement on social media, a lot of people kind of called me out for it, where I said, I know 100% sure Donald Trump did not partake in assaulting any people, trafficking any girls, any relationships with any females who are minors. And the reason why I feel so confident to be able to say that is because guess what? Maxwell herself said Donald Trump did not partake in any of these activities. He was not at the townhouse. He was not on the island. He was not on those flights. He didn't do any of these things. Virginia Giuffre, who, and I know I never say her name, she was probably the number one victim who had the most attention. She worked at Mar-a-Lago. She's one of the people that Epstein poached. She said Donald Trump never, ever hit on any of us at Mar-a-Lago. There was nothing inappropriate that ever happened. She never saw him at the townhouse, at the island, or at any of these parties. He never partook in any of this activity. Now we have Epstein's attorney who has said the same thing, that Donald Trump is not involved. He is not involved. He was not at the parties. He did not partake in any activities. We have emails from Jeffrey Epstein himself who said Trump never got a massage. And that was the key word, massage, for what was really going on. Massage. And so I feel very confident in being able to say that Donald Trump did. I'm not saying he's an angel. I'm not saying he has great moral character, nothing against him, but we all know that he has not had great moral character in the past. I think we all knew that before we maybe cast a vote, for him. We wanted Donald Trump because he runs this country like a business, has nothing to do with his personal life. We persecuted every single CEO of every company that cheated on their wife or girlfriend or husband or whatever the situation might be. We wouldn't be able to shop anywhere or buy anything, because what is it, 50-60% of marriages have some type of cheating situation. We wouldn't even be able to talk to half the people we know if we held moral value, at the highest of levels. So I've been very well aware of Trump's past, but I absolutely do not think that he was ever involved with any of these girls on Epstein Island, at the townhouse, any of these parties. I think everything that's been said about him has been proven to be just media manipulation to make people hate him. That's all it is. They just want people to hate him. And that regime does, the Democrat regime, to their opposer. Trump is the person the political party that opposes the Democrat regime. So they're going to do anything within their power to take him out, whether that's an assassination or an assassination of his character. And so there's nothing going to be in these files that point to Donald Trump. I already know that. Jay says, look at the trans Nashville shooter, complete radio silence, total cover up because it didn't fit the narrative. You're right, Jay. And that's only one instance, Jay, that you're bringing up of many, because, the trans power movement, I'm not against trans people, quite honestly. I was just talking to somebody about that last night. I have some more liberal beliefs because I think people should live however they want to live. If you're not harming anyone, you're not teaching children to carry your values when it comes to that stuff, and you want to be a trans person, you want to be a cross-dresser, you're part of the LGBTQ community, fine, be happy, live your life. I could care less what anybody's doing. I don't want to know if you're heterosexual. I don't want to know if you're gay. I really don't care. I just do not care. If you're not harming anyone, you're not hurting anyone, just live your life. Unfortunately, liberals don't see it that way. They want us all to be very accepting and be just like they are. And Jay says that, but these trans power movements, so these folks on the very fringe far left are very dangerous individuals. And Jay said the Democrats had these files for 4 years under Biden. Had there been any damning evidence towards Trump, they would have released it then. I have my mixed feelings on that, Jay. Now, again, I don't think there's any damning evidence against Trump. I really don't. I know Trump's name is in those files because he knew Jeffrey Epstein. There's going to be a lot of names in those files. That doesn't mean all of those people took part in anything. And, and I'm glad you brought that up because I almost lost track of where I was earlier. I played a video on the show where Trump was talking about exactly that. He said that the reason why he was fighting against having these files, these were his own words. He tried to explain why he didn't want the files released, because that's such a big point. Everybody tries to make, well, he doesn't want the files released, so he must be something bad. And what he stated in his own words was, I don't want the files released because I know everything in those files will be twisted and manipulated, propagandized. He may not have used that exact term, propagandized, against him. That they're going to see his name in these files because his name is in the files. His name is absolutely in the files. Not in the files because he harmed anyone or took advantage of it, because they were associates. They knew each other. They lived in New York City. They both lived in Palm Beach. They knew each other, and they had known each other for many years. And he feels that because his name is in the files, that it's going to be twisted and turned to make it look bad against him. And he knows that Americans are very fickle. A lot of Americans read ahead and they don't go any further to read the actual body of the article. And a headline, you guys know what I'm talking about. There could be a headline to a news story and that says one one thing, have clickbait or whatever, then you go in and you read the body of the article and it completely contradicts what the headline is. And I think he understands that that's exactly what the media is going to do. They're going to twist it, they're going to turn it, they're going to make it look like he's guilty. People who follow him are going to stop following him. People who supported will stop supporting him because they're only going to look at the headlines. They're going to believe the lies and the manipulation. He's been very clear about that's why he doesn't want these files released. And then finally, I think he said, I've had enough. I've had enough of all of it. Release the files. If that's what the people want, let's just do it and get it over with. Because I think most people, including myself, we just want to move on. And I think that after this weekend, we will move on. There probably won't be a lot of reason to talk about any of these files any longer. But there is still some fallout that's occurring now. I think there will be fallout. Larry Summers is somebody who was listed. Donald Trump is those names yesterday. There's a couple of individuals he's wanting to look into to say, hey, maybe we need to look into their involvement a little bit more. Because, hey, if everybody's going to come after me, maybe we need to look at the real people who are involved. Larry Summers used to be the, oh gosh, I think he was the former Harvard president, the president of Harvard. That probably tells you everything you need to know. Well, as the former president of Harvard, I really don't know where he stands right now with Harvard, but I just read this morning that he has stepped down. What he stepped down from, I do not know, but he was the former president of Harvard. He has now stepped down due to his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Peter Thiel, they're looking into him. I just saw an article this morning, an interview with him where he was trying to explain his relationship with Epstein, that it was strictly about taxes. He thought that Epstein was this big tax whiz. So he met with Epstein a few different times to talk about taxes. He's trying to explain why he wasn't in the. But here's the bigger part. The Clintons, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton refuse. They absolutely refuse to sit down with the Oversight Committee and talk and give their deposition about their involvement with Epstein. They refuse. Now, how are they allowed to refuse to do it? That's what I would like to know. The Clintons always feel like they're above the law, don't they? Every time turn around, they're above the law. This is not the first to give a deposition in a case. But when it comes to these Epstein files, they are refusing to come in and sit down and give a deposition. I think they should be forced to. I don't know how the law works when it comes to depositions. I don't know if they have to, if they don't choice, if they do have a choice. I think they should be forced to come in. Hold them in contempt if that's a thing when it comes to the Oversight Committee. Put them in a prison cell and say, you know what, when you're ready to talk, we'll let you out. Give us your deposition and off you go, and we already know, and really what does it matter? Bill Clinton already lied, right? He already committed perjury. He's only going to say what he thinks people want him to hear either way. So does it really matter? Probably not. But when these items come out, I'm not expecting any big bombshells. I think you'll be disappointed if you expect a big bombshell. I told you guys a long time ago, go back and read that book, Pervasion of Justice, and you'll see everything you need to know in there for the most part. There's a lot of witness testimony. If you go back and read the witness testimony, that tells you, quite a bit. And I don't see women coming out of the woodwork saying Donald Trump harmed me or Donald Trump did this or I saw Donald Trump at a party. If you go out there and look, those stories just aren't there. Now, Democrats will tell you they are, but then they can't provide any proof. Democrats on the liberals, if you're on Threads, if you go over Threads, I made that post about Trump, being innocent when it comes to the Epstein files. And I think last I looked, I'm not over there too much. I had 7,500 comments. I would say 99.9% of those 7,500 comments were people absolutely blasting me over my post. And I can't tell you how many people believe that Donald Trump is a convicted pedophile or that he's a convicted rapist, which is just not true. But that shows you how brainwashed some of these people are and how they listen to liberal media and they believe these lies. And I had to correct some of the people. No, Donald Trump has never been charged as a pedophile. He has never been charged as a rapist. He's never been charged crimes whatsoever. None. So therefore, if there are no charges, he certainly has never been convicted. And then people want to bring up the civil suit with, is it Jean Carroll? Is that her name? And I'm not going to victim shame. I don't know anything about Jean Carroll, but I do know that anyone can file a civil suit. Jay, I have never met you in person that I recall, maybe at an event, but I could, and sorry, Jay, to use you as this example, I could say, hey, I was out at this event back when I was on the show, one of the other radio shows, and I met Jay, and Jay sexually assaulted me, on my way to my car. And, and I could carry that out. I could call the media. I could hold all these interviews and blame Jay and say, hey, yes, I don't have enough information to charge him, that the police aren't charge him with anything, but I'm going to sue him. Yes, it would be wrong. It certainly did not happen. Absolutely did not happen. I met. But who's to stop me from doing it? And then let's just say I did that and Jay is running for office. Well, guess what would happen? That would spread like wildfire. And a very large portion of the population would believe me. Just because I'm a woman and because I might be the victim, they would believe me. It shouldn't be that. I've spoken out about that many times, that it's wrong. And I think women who make false allegations should be charged to the fullest extent of the law. And the law should be changed to charge them with even more, quite honestly. But it happens all the time. I mean, I've never known a woman to do this, but I know there are women, some say men too, that go out and they make these false allegations against someone for various reasons. Maybe they don't like them. Maybe it's political, maybe it's for money. But either way, these days you have to really look at these different cases and tear them apart. So because Jean Carroll sued Donald Trump in a civil suit and claimed that it crowded, what was it, Macy's, a very crowded dressing room where people are in these different changing clothes and trying outfits on, that Donald Trump sucked her. I'm going to leave it at that. You guys can make up your own mind, because I am not victim shaming. I was not there. I don't know what happened. Maybe it did happen. Maybe it didn't. My point is that anyone can accuse, and it's a very different situation than if you're charged with a crime or convicted of a crime. Just a very different situation. So we're going to move on. We're probably not going to talk a whole lot more about the Epstein files on this show. We'll see what's released on the weekend. We'll see what everything says. I don't expect any accountability, and you shouldn't either. Don't expect accountability, because if you do, you're going to be disappointed. It's not going to happen. And we're going to see a lot of redacted files, and then we're probably just going to quit talking about it, because we're just going to beat it. We already have, and there's just no point. Nothing's ever going to happen. Pretty much any case you can think of that you want to see some justice, probably just not going to happen. But speaking of justice, ICE is in Charlotte. You've probably seen that. And the folks in Charlotte are losing their minds over ICE being there. Now, we're told that ICE has armored vehicles, because guess what? They need armored vehicles. People are attacking them left and right. And I've got a couple videos to show you out of Charlotte, out of East Mecklenburg, North Carolina, of prepping ahead of ICE being in town. Now, they're already there. I don't think they've gone too far yet. Here's some students. Now, students have every right to protest what ICE is doing. I feel that students who protest what ICE is doing are probably very misinformed about what ICE is doing, probably because they're watching MSNBC and listening to all these liberal talking points. But either way, I'm going to show you this quick video clip of these students who have staged a walkout to protest ICE being in Charlotte.
Some live pictures right now. This is outside of East Mecklenburg High School, where what appears to be students out of the school building there. We see some of them with signs in hand. We aren't sure. We heard reports of a possible protest there, maybe students walking out. So we're going to continue to monitor this.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to make my point after I show you this next video. After that, because there is also a situation here where we have people who are out, let me find it, handing out whistles to citizens. So that way, if you see ICE coming, if you see ICE in the area, they blow the whistle. So then if you're here in this country illegally, or if you're concerned that ICE might arrest you, then they're going to blow the whistle. So you have a chance to go and hide. And then we're going to talk about why this is so incredibly idiotic.
They do not like that shit. Oh.
Yeah, whistles, whistles, whistles. So you're a reporter. Okay. Whistles. They hate them. Yeah, blow on that shit as loud as you fucking can, dude. They hate it. Look at me and my whistle. So
Pardon me real quick.
Okay, form a crowd, stay loud. That's what the whistles say. Form a crowd, stay loud. Now let's keep in mind they are protecting criminals. Okay, they are protecting criminals. They are impeding justice. If you have a whistle, if I'm an ICE agent and I'm there to conduct a raid or to make an arrest, or I'm just standing there minding my own business, eating a sandwich or something, and you come around, you start whistling your whistle, you should immediately go to jail. You should be rounded up and you should go to jail because you are impeding an investigation. You're impeding an arrest. You're trying to keep officers from doing their job. So in that fact, you absolutely need to sit. And there is a law, by the way, that is breaking the law. You cannot get in the way of police officers who are conducting an investigation or making an arrest. But yet these people will do it and they'll get away with it. They'll get away with it. Quite honestly, we don't have enough prison cells to hold all these people for their idiocy. And Matthew says, is Charlotte suddenly a hotbed of criminal and or illegal activity? Yes. It's been a long time since I've been there, but it used to be an example of up and coming city, unlike St. Louis, Chicago, or Memphis. Didn't realize things were much worse there. You know, what I'm hearing, and I looked, I don't have any proof of this, and I don't have any proof to show you. You can go out and, of course, look it up yourself. But I've heard problems in Charlotte lately with gangs like Tren Aragua, where these gangs they're still here. They haven't all the Tren Aragua members have not been yet deported or located. And I've heard they've had a lot of burglaries, a lot of problems with these gangs, organized crime through Tren Aragua. So I think that probably is what's behind it. But I also think that it could be that somebody from that city may request and say, hey, we're having a lot of problems. Maybe we could use your help here. I'm sure there is some criteria being met why they have to be there. I tried to look up like what's going on in Charlotte, and the only thing I saw was the fact that they have these Tren Aragua organized crime rings taking place in the Charlotte area. But I also saw that there were a lot of folks allegedly in that area who are there illegally, and maybe somebody has reported, or maybe they felt that that's a place they need to go. There's a lot of information, of course, ICE has that we don't know about different areas. I've been waiting for them to come to St. Louis. Hasn't happened yet. I don't think we have a lot. Our problem in St. Louis is probably a whole different problem. That Tren Aragua is not in the St. Louis area, and an FBI friend and I talked about that, and he's like, nope. Not yet. I guess there's nobody to rob in St. Louis, or it's just not worth it. Not yet in St. Louis. And so I'm thinking that's why they're in Charlotte. But again, what did we say yesterday? Like 90 something % of the arrests that ICE makes are people who have serious crimes. And I'm not talking about they just simply entered the country illegally. That's all they did wrong. They came here illegally. Now those people sometimes get caught up in these deportations. And so let's say that ICE is going out, they're in Charlotte today. They go to a certain restaurant where they are looking for a criminal, somebody who, let's say, is involved in a prior domestic battery case, and is in this country illegally, and had a prior deportation order. Most of the people they're coming after had prior deportation orders. So they come and they go to arrest this guy. They gather everybody up in the restaurant, all the employees, and they're like, oh, show me your papers, your documentation. And let's say they're there for one criminal who's committed a very serious crime. And then they find 3 other people who are entered this country illegally, but have not committed a serious crime. Well, they're going to arrest those people too. And those people are also potentially going to be deported. Now, so that's why you hear people say, well, they're deporting people who've never committed a crime. They're not intentionally going after those people. They don't know who they are. They don't even know where they're at. But if they get caught up in one of these other operations, then yes, they're going to take them in and deport them as well. And, they by law, an ICE agent cannot go into a business. Let's say if there's a raid at a business or whatever the situation is, and see that people have entered this country illegally and just say, okay, you're free to go. you've committed a crime, but you're free to go. No, they have to uphold the law. They have to uphold the law. If they come across people who have committed crimes, even if it's not a violent crime, even if that's not who they're there for, yes, they're going to take you too. And so I don't know what all is going on in Charlotte, but it's about to go down in Charlotte. That I do know. So some other things going on today. I don't have too much more to talk about. I wasn't going to talk about this, but we will. Marjorie Taylor Greene. I've always liked Marjorie Taylor Greene. I've followed her. I agree with so many. I don't agree with everything she says, but I agree with most of what I remember we used to make fun of her because we all thought she was having an affair with Kevin McCarthy. I don't know if you guys remember that or not. Well, now all of a sudden, her and Trump are enemies. They don't like each other. She has been calling him out, pretty much accusing him of wrongdoing with Epstein. She has accused him of a lot of different things. She's upset about a lot of different things the Trump administration is doing. And some of those I get, but she has really gone off the rails. And so you kind of have to think, are we going to continue to support Marjorie Taylor Greene? We like her. We like a lot of things she stands up for. She's been one of the more vocal Congress folks, that stands up and talks about issues that no one else will. So I've always liked her for that reason. But I don't know. It's like my brain is kind of like I don't know what to think right now about Marjorie Taylor Greene. When you really admire someone and then they kind of go off the rails, it's like what to think. So we have. I'm just going to play this video here for you. We'll talk about it after we play the video.
I did see the president today, actually, and we discussed the Marjorie Taylor Greene issue a little bit. What happened with her is very simple. She was wanting to run statewide in Georgia. He privately and discreetly sent her a copy of a poll that he had seen, and she was way down. It was not going to work out. And ever since that moment, he did her a favor, actually, by saving her from a humiliation. But ever since that moment, she's opposed him on bombing the Houthi rebels, on bombing Iran. She's opposed him on deportation. She's gone on TV shows and attacked him. And so because he sort of betrayed her in her mind on that political moment, I think he did her a favor. She's become an opponent on this other stuff.
She's calling him to release the Epstein files.
Okay, and they're doing
hates
it.
that.
But
So you can't omit that because that's the reason that he's really gone, full throttle against her.
So a lot of people believe that this fight started over the Epstein files. And so that's Scott Jennings kind of clarifying, it's not about the Epstein files, that Donald Trump secretly had a file. He had a poll that said that Marjorie Taylor Greene was not going to win this broader election in the state of Georgia, and that he wanted to let her know to save herself the embarrassment of potentially running and losing. And now, whether you think he did her a favor, didn't do a favor, if you think there's more to it, I don't know. It's up to you to decide for yourself. But Scott Jennings is telling us, no, Marjorie Taylor Greene is now against Donald Trump. She's calling him out on all these different issues, opposing him on all these issues because of that poll, because he told her she was not going to win. So we'll have to leave it at that because I don't know if it's true, if it's not true. I haven't heard anything yet from Marjorie Taylor Greene and her explaining her side of the story. But, we'll soon find out, that is for sure, what direction she's going to go in. But I do know one thing, she shouldn't tangle with Donald Trump. I think we all know how that's not going to end well for her. So she probably needs to take a few steps back, take a breather, get back on track. And quite honestly, in this day and time, if you oppose Donald Trump, you're gonna find yourself on an isolated island, quite honestly. If you're a conservative, particularly a Christian conservative, and you oppose Donald Trump, most people who support Donald Trump will definitely ostracize you, no question about it. And I think that's where she's headed. There's a couple other things I want to talk about really quick. Palestinians. There's a lot of talk right now that there's a group called I guess it's pronounced Al-Majid. And this group is somehow taking Palestinians and putting them on flights and sending them to Africa. Do you remember when they talked about relocating the folks in Gaza? Of course, there's, a couple million people there, relocating them to a completely different area. And so now a lot of people are talking like, is that happening undercover? A lot of people oppose the thought of moving them, but here they are. There's these flights coming in to Johannesburg and to South Africa. They're setting up communities for a lot of these people to live. Now, some of the controversy comes from is that this group Al-Majid, they're charging a lot of money to these Palestinian people to get them out of Gaza and take them to Africa. There's people who say, well, once they get to Africa, they can go anywhere they want, including the United States and other countries, unimpeded. Now, if you are somebody who lives in Gaza and you want to leave Gaza, you're supposed to have a stamp of Israel's approval. You cannot leave without Israel stamping off and giving their approval for you to leave the Gaza area. But none of these people have that stamp. So everybody's wondering, how are they getting out? And, how long this will last, I don't know. Now that their route has been revealed, it was too long for me to get into the route these people had to take to get out of the area and get to Africa. But it is a very interesting story, and we'll see how all this plays out, because I really am curious to know, are we truly trying to move all these people to another country? A lot of people say, well, yeah, Donald Trump wants to do that because he wants to create, of course, all these beaches and resorts and all this other stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. I did play a funny video about it, though, several weeks ago, but I don't think we're going in that direction. Food, I'm going to quickly go through this. I hate it because I talk so much that when it comes to some of the things I want to talk about, I don't have time. And I hope you know what? I might not have, darn it. I don't even think I loaded that video today. Did I? I really wanted to show you guys this video. Maybe I did. Let's take a look at this. I think I did. I'm like, why wouldn't I have done that? It's a very short video because I had this conversation with somebody the other day and I started thinking about it. And we've all known, if you're somebody who eats fast food, you go to restaurants, you eat out, prices have gotten higher, portions have become smaller. But in some respects, the portions have become super tiny. A person that I talked to said, well, I would rather them raise the price and keep the size, item, and I'll just have to pay more for it if I really want it. And they were specifically talking about McDonald's fish sandwich, the filet, McDonald's Filet-O-Fish. Back in the day, it was much larger and it was cooked differently. When they would used to get a fish sandwich at McDonald's, where it was in the oil, but it would have like juices and stuff that would drip out of the corners and it would burn their mouth, when they were trying to eat it. But they're like, it's not like that anymore. Now, when they get a fish sandwich at McDonald's, it's a real tiny little square of fish. The bun covers it, it's very small. They don't have those crispy, drippy edges anymore. And they were just highly disappointed what McDonald's was doing, with some of their products. And things are a lot smaller. But I saw this video and I kind of laughed this morning because I thought this is exactly what this person was talking about. And it's the new apparently Wendy's has resized their what is this called? The Bacon Junior? Is that what it's called? The double bacon, not double. I don't know, but it's a little Wendy's cheeseburger. And you guys probably know what it is more than I do. I thought I wrote it down. Oh, the Junior Bacon Cheeseburger apparently is now the size of, back in the day, I remember Burger King used to have these little hamburger shooters. They were like little 1-bite, 2-bite cheeseburgers. And that's exactly what this cheeseburger looks like. So now, for yourself, no wonder people can't afford to
You guys, since when did the Junior Bacon Cheeseburgers become like for like literal juniors? for like little tiny babies? How many bites is that for you?
Probably 2. 1 if I was hungry.
And this is yeah. I'm calling the police.
Yeah.
That is so tiny. That is so tiny. That is so tiny. I mean, that's actually smaller than what a child size, cheeseburger would look like. It's very tiny. But we're seeing that. We're seeing people raise prices, you cut down portions, smaller. And, that's a big deal for somebody like Wendy's to undertake, because think about that. They have to order all these new little buns. They have to order, items to go with it. But yet they probably haven't lowered the price of these items. How people do it, quite honestly. It used to be that people ate out at fast food because it was cheaper sometimes to eat fast food than it was to buy in a meal, nutrition, cook at home. Now it's kind of the opposite of that. You cannot go out to one of these fast food places and get something decent for a decent price. It's actually becoming, if you're not buying steak, you're not buying beef, it's a lot cheaper these days to cook at home. So I hope people are waking up, because boy, that's a big deal. But I thought that was funny when I saw that little tiny cheeseburger. And one last thing I want to talk about, it's getting ready to start storming here, it looks like in a couple seconds, because guess what? We are heading into our winter weather. We've had a nice little reprieve, haven't we? Even though it's raining in my area, I don't know about you guys, we've had a nice little reprieve from the cold. Remember, we had a couple of days where it was just super cold and absolutely miserable. So now is the time to start getting ready. I know me personally, I don't know what you're doing for your winter prep, but every year I procrastinate. Every single year. Last year I got caught. They had that bad snowstorm, ice, snow, could not get out of the driveway. I have a really long driveway, by the way. And so therefore, not like my old driveway where it was, so many feet and you could shovel it out pretty easily. Nope, not here. And so therefore I'm like, this year I'm not that's not going to happen to me. I'm getting ahead of things. And I noticed that I am not the only one, because when I went to buy snow melt, there were only 3 left. Get out, do your winter prep. Very important. Mary says in the 70s, the Whopper was about 5 inches wide. Mary, I don't remember that, but my first job when I lived in Chicago was at a burger. I was 15, and you know how when you're 15, I don't know if they still do this now, you could leave school early. I think I left at noon or 1 o'clock. I left school and high school, and my friend's dad, gosh, there was a lot of thunder and lightning just now. My friend's dad owned a glass company, and he sold the glass. He was the supplier of glass to this Burger King. And so my friend and I got jobs there when we were 15. And I can remember then the Whopper was like this big. It was huge. It was absolutely huge. Her and I would cut one in half and like split it. It was enormous. Now the Whopper is the size of what a regular cheeseburger was back then. I remember back in the day getting a Whopper, and it was enormous. I remember thinking, who in the world can eat this great big giant hamburger? It was huge, like the size of a plate. Now all of a sudden, nope, it's the same size of what the hamburger was back then. And I know, since I worked there back in those days, we moved to St. Louis right not too long after that, so I didn't work there too long. I didn't do the food service. I was the person at the window doing the drive-through at the window. But I do remember seeing the food and stuff being made, and I would kind of help in a pinch. But I'll tell you, things have changed. Jay says I can take my family to a restaurant cheaper than I can McDonald's. I know McDonald's prices have gotten outrageously expensive. And somebody was just telling me the other day that every McDonald's has different pricing too. The owners can price things a little bit differently. Some take coupons, some don't. Some take some coupons and not other coupons. So that's also a big deal. McRibs out right now. Somebody was messaging me about McRibs earlier today. And McRibs, I think they were, what was the point? I'm trying to think what the point was in telling me this. I think they were saying that a McRib was like $8, $7, something like that for just the sandwich alone. Maybe they said it was $8 for just the sandwich alone. But I remember thinking that is absolutely insane. Didn't they used to be like $2.50? Now all of a sudden they're like $8. And I think that was just for the sandwich, not everything else. So don't include that in your winter prep. You don't want none of that stuff. But anyway, get out, do your winter prep, get your things done. I'm going to be prepping my chicken coop. I've got a lot of stuff to do. I bought de-icer for my windows, the kind that you spray if you get ice on your windows. I went out and I bought a bunch of as much pet-friendly snow melt as the store had, and they didn't have a lot. So people are already ahead of the game. So get out and get that when you can. Don't be caught without it. Last year I already have a bunch of those. Oh, what are those things called? Hand warmers. You open up the pouch and they get really warm. I keep those for emergencies. In my car, I keep them everywhere I can think of. And there have been times where I've had to use them. I know I got out of my car like a dummy last winter. My car was running. I got out. Somehow I locked it. I was freezing cold. Thank God, somebody was there and gave us some of these hand warmers, because of course I didn't have my hand warmers were in the car. But they really did help because I was freezing, and I was able to put those in my pocket. And, if you can put those in your pocket and keep your hands warm, that will warm up your blood and it will circulate around your body and keep you from potentially becoming hypothermic. So please go out. They're very inexpensive to buy those little heated up hand warmers. Get out and get you some of those. And for me personally, I'm looking at my tires. My Jeep needs all 4 new tires, all 4. And I'm kind of waiting. I know there's a Black Friday sale coming up. So I'm probably going to buy all 4 new tires on Black Friday, when you can get like 1 tire either free if you buy 3, or, sometimes it's $30, $50 off per tire. My tire is expensive. So I'm kind of waiting for a Black Friday sale. But think about that. Make sure you have good tires because people drive like maniacs. And if you're not prepared, you're not ready to be driving, people will trust me. They will run you off the road. No question about it. Happy Tuesday, Nancy. And one other thing, I bought, to me, this is probably my favorite part of winter prep is the de-icer window washer. I've already put mine in. I had it drained out. I put the de-icer window. I'm telling you, I'm going to be ready. I am going to be ready for winter this year. And you should too, because, even though the winter almanac, the farmer's almanac, they claim is no longer going to exist, it did state, a lot of people are saying that this winter is going to be a really rough winter. We're expecting a lot of snowfall, a lot of ice, a lot of extreme temperatures. So please go out and get ready. I would talk about that a lot more, but I've already gone over my time. So we'll talk more about that another day. And I did read also that Kennedy, I don't know if you know this, but Robert Kennedy follows the carnivore diet. I'm thinking, I might give that a try. It seems pretty restrictive. And with all the crazy health stuff I've had with my lymph nodes and my lungs, I'm like, maybe it wouldn't be bad to eliminate a lot of things from my diet. See if that helps. I don't have the best diet. I'm running around. I'm busy, literally nonstop working 24/7. So it's not easy to follow any certain plan when you literally have no time to do anything. But that's something I'm going to look into. And we'll talk more about that when I come back on Monday, because unfortunately I will not be here tomorrow or Thursday or Friday. I have to work in St. Charles for a screening of Can I Only Imagine episode 2. And then I'm heading out to Springfield, Missouri for that same. We have some folks coming in from out of state, studio executives and so on. A couple of these different screenings, and we're screening it for the troops, which is really exciting. I don't know which members, but we're told it's for the troops. So that's always exciting for us to be part of. So I'm going to be very, very, very busy the next couple of days. Unfortunately, I hate missing shows. I feel like it's so inconsistent, and I know I lose followers. I lose, listeners, because people are wanting something consistent. If you're going to have a daily show every day, but for me, work has to come first. I am self-employed and I have to put work first, unfortunately. But I'm going to come up with a plan to where maybe I can have something that's more consistent, maybe a different time. Who knows? Maybe people don't even care. But either way, I will see you guys all on Monday. Of course, I'll be posting anything I come across new on the social media sites, as always. I was just watching some guy earlier talking about the